Sadly, we stay with funeral services because Dr. Sam Motsuenyane is also being laid to rest today. He's known as the father of black business, and that procession is underway in Pretoria. Dr. Motsuenyane, who established the National African Federated Chamber of Commerce and the African Bank, passed away last month at the age of 97. Watching those developments is our economics editor, Tshepo Mongoai, who joins us now live for a sense of what's taken place. Dr. Sam is being remembered as a larger-than-life figure, a leader who is one of a kind. What else has emerged today as people bid him their final farewell?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that came out very strongly, that his simple life. He lived with his community in a rural or semi-rural area of Winterveld. Despite his high profile as a businessman, as a diplomat, he was rooted in community development. He lived a very simple life at a time when, materialism is something that engulfs many people, and the show of wealth is something that is often displayed, but not with Dr. Sam Motsuenyane. For more on this, we are joined by a family spokesperson, Sadi Motsuenyane. Just tell us a little bit about the life of this giant who lives among his people, shared the same space, when many people who have kind of make it in life, they move away from where they come from and go stay in cities.
Firstly, let me thank you for this opportunity. Dr. Sam Motsuenyane is a very simple man, very humble, and a dedicated and committed Christian. First and foremost, he loves his culture. And whenever we went home, because Kerangwani, he would say, remember where you come from, remember your roots, remember hore rona re bakwena ba ha Modimo sana. He even wrote a book, Ya Family Tree, to teach us as a family hore the roots tsa rona di go kae, where do we come from, so that when they are gone, we should not be not knowing where we're coming from. He liked to use very, very simple idioms, like he would say, what it really means is that as adults, we must leave the wisdom for the children so that they can be able to grow knowing who they are, knowing what to do. He was a visionary, not only for the country, but also for his family. When it comes to the community, he's one person who was very much concerned about the way the community is excluded in development. And that is why his focus was on developing the communities, in particular farmers, because he's a farmer at heart. And remember that his first diploma was in social work. So he's both a social worker, but also a farmer. Now that made him who he was. That is why he found it to be good to be rooted in his community. So when people moved to the suburbs, he decided that he's going to stay with the community. He started a nursery where he was actually using that nursery to share the knowledge with the local community. When he came back as an ambassador after retirement, he found that most of the small farms in his area were not utilized. And then he called most of the young people to say, we cannot just live without using the soil, because he used the simple idiom that says, Lihuma le tswa mung, which means that wealth comes from the soil. And what he did was to use his nursery to educate them and also to provide those farmers with citrus trees. And out of that, they started a cooperative which actually was even exporting oranges. That is the kind of man he is.
We also learned that he was not preoccupied with materialism. In fact, he used most of his resources to look after many family members, take them to school. Just tell us a little bit more.
Well, Rangwane, I would not say he was unfortunate, because, all things work together to those who love the Lord. He had 6 boys, and out of the 6, 5 passed on. And he took the responsibility of taking all their children and educating them. But he did not only end there. He started a foundation, and he was actually the seed. He was the person who provided the seed for that foundation. So whatever that he had, it was not for him, to keep it for himself, but he was a man with a heart of sharing.
What can we learn from the life of Dr. Sam Motsuenyane, as you know him, as someone who grew up very close to him?
Rangwane, one thing that was one outstanding characteristic of his is integrity. That's one thing that we learned from him, that whatever that we do, we must do it with dedication, and we must never lose our own integrity. As a man who has been involved in so much, like, starting businesses and whatever, but in all that he did, he was never ever found, to be wanting. That is what we learned from him. The other thing that we learned from him is that the heart that gives receives. So we must learn to give and not to hoard, because he was a giving man. But the other thing that we learned from him is humility. You can have the whole world, but unless you are humble, you are nothing. So his humility is something that actually he showed to us as a family, that we have to be humble. It does not matter what material things you have, but what makes a person is his humility.
What were his last views with regard to, lack of integrity and morale that we're seeing in our communities, in families, in business formations, in the political space?
Well, he was very much concerned about the lack of development, because when you look at the past 30 years, instead of decline in poverty, instead of a decline in unemployment, instead of a decline in inequality, all these were rising, and that was his concern. He often reminded me of the 1932 Carnegie Report, which was a report that came out of the challenges that were facing whites at that time, which was aiming to address white poverty. And he said to me, this is the report that we should have utilized to address poverty in this country, because whites were able to address white poverty from that Carnegie report, and the focus was largely on cooperatives. That if we could use cooperatives, especially agricultural cooperatives, we would be able to get our people out of poverty. He was, even in his last words, he would say, "My child, social grants and all these other freebies that people are getting will not help South Africa, because South Africa will become a welfare state, and yet it is supposed to be a developmental state."
One of the issues that came out during the memorial service was the school that I think is in Soshanguve that was named after him, and there were certain concerns that he has raised about that particular school.
Well, his concerns about the Dr. Sam Motsuenyane High School was, actually he said, was I that kind of a bad person that the school that is named after me should be in this condition, because that school is built on wetland. And he was like, where were the engineers? Why should a school be built on wetland and that school be named after me? He was very much concerned, and he has actually challenged us to take this up with the Department of Education, which is what we are doing now. Because what he wanted to do for the school, he could not do because of where it is located, and there was nothing that he could do about it. But he was very much concerned that the school that is named after him was in such bad condition, and he was like, does that reflect me? Was I that bad?
Tell us about some of the legacy projects that will be continuing in his honor.
Well, the legacy projects that will be continuing in his honor, firstly through the foundation, he is supporting farmers. He is supporting, there is a bursary that is offering, it is a Dr. Sam Motsuenyane bursary, which is for not just the disadvantaged, but all the young people who are deserving. And he also is promoting entrepreneurship. There is an initiative that makes a peanut butter, which is a young girl. It's called Gog Lily. He is supporting that. He supported those children and sent them to India to go and study how to make peanut butter. And they came back, and they are now settled. It's a business that is running. There are also other farming projects, like there's where he is supporting farmers, particularly in livestock. So those are some of the projects that he actually wanted us to continue with. But even beyond that, one thing that he also wanted us to do is to move people from dependency, that people should learn that they've got assets and they can use their assets, and everyone who supports them can build on the assets that they have. Hence, he was talking about asset-based community development.
Thank you very much. That's Tshepo Mongoai, family spokesperson, talking about some of the legacy project of Dr. Sam Motsuenyane. Well, now, the funeral proceedings are still underway, and probably in the next hour or so, they should come to an end, and then the proceedings will head to the graveyard for burial rites to get started. From me, Tshepo Mongoai here in Acacia Community Hall. It's back to you in studio.
All right, Tshepo, thanks very much indeed. Tshepo Mongoai is our economics editor here at SABC News. And of course, we'll try to keep up with as much of those proceedings as we can throughout the course of the morning.